In April 1965, Dr. King addressed the Massachusetts legislature in a joint session. The next day, thousands gathered with him for a freedom rally on Boston Common, protesting housing discrimination and segregated schools. Today, his legacy lives on in politics here in Massachusetts. State Senator Liz Miranda is one of many lawmakers working to carry on his mission. She is chair of the Joint Committee on Racial Equity, Civil Rights, and Inclusion. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. The honor's all mine.
We appreciate you being here. First, we do want to talk about the state of the political climate that we're in right now, right? We are seeing protests in Boston and around the country after an ICE agent shot and killed Renee Good in Minneapolis. Well, Dr. King was an advocate for civil disobedience actions like boycotts, sit-ins, and marches. Well, how has peaceful assembly been important in your life, and how have you been influenced by the civil rights movement of Dr. King's time?
Well, thank you. I think one thing that's important to share is that in leadership, it's about courage and moral clarity. And Dr. King really understood one important tenet of that is that systems don't change on their own, and we don't do this work alone. And he knew that we have to disrupt the systems that have created the structural and systemic barriers that have made our lives more difficult. I'm a student of the civil rights movement, although I'm much younger than that. I went to college and really studied his movement in the civil rights, but also the women that were in the civil rights movement. When I think about Barbara Jordan, Shirley Chisholm, Fannie Lou Hamer, Dorothy Irene Height, and all the women who participated, we know that democracy, the bedrock of democracy, is being able to share what you think about your government. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My parents came from Cape Verde in the 70s, came to Roxbury. I grew up in a community that fought for itself. The founding of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, there's 2 movies and a book about it because the residents said, don't dump on us. And so I believe in civil disobedience. I've participated in many marches, and I think one thing that is important to share is that we can't make this comfortable. The climate is very scary. I'm one of 4 black women to ever serve in the Massachusetts Senate, and I'm one of 5 black women now out of 200 legislators. And we think we're progressive in Massachusetts, but we have the widest racial wealth gap in the nation. And so we still have a lot to fight for. And if we pay attention to our past, we can definitely implement those strategies now in the future.
And I know on Beacon Hill, you are fighting for racial justice and equity through laws. That includes addressing the racial wealth gap. So, let's talk about home ownership, right? It's a critical driver of intergenerational wealth, but Massachusetts is facing a racial home ownership gap. It's very wide. According to the state's 2025 statewide housing needs assessment, we have to talk about these stats. Only 37% of black households and 32% of Hispanic households own their own home. That's compared to 70% of non-Hispanic white householders. So what work is being done at the state level to address that?
When we often think about housing, we have to think about it as a human right. We have to do everything. I live in the city of Boston. I live in Roxbury. And if I did not purchase my grandparents' home about a decade ago, I wouldn't have anywhere to live. We have the highest housing costs in the entire state of Massachusetts. And when you think about my friends, for example, many of them grew up in neighborhoods like Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, and they could not afford to buy homes in the neighborhoods that they love. Many of them are living on the South Shore, as far as Easton or in Milton and Dorchester. And when we were growing up, you couldn't afford a home in Milton or Easton. And one of the biggest problems is that we have a history of urban renewal and redlining that people don't discuss. We're behind the 8 ball in terms of being able to have the access to capital. And the laws that we're making today is particularly around creating more opportunities for home ownership. For example, the STASH program, ensuring that people have down payment assistance. When we think about being wealthy, right? Starting a business, generational wealth, and being able to buy a home. Those are the 3 biggest tenets on being able to take your family out of poverty. And we're making it very difficult in the Commonwealth. For black women, for example, we make 48 cents on the dollar to our white counterparts, often for the same job. And that's a big problem because the pay gender gap and the racial wealth gap go hand in hand. Oftentimes people quote the Federal Reserve study that was done 10 years ago in the Spotlight series, around $8 of wealth for black families and $251,000 for white families. That's unconscionable in a place that we think is progressive, where everyone has an opportunity. And so I'm doubling down at the State House, working on policies that will not only fund more development of home ownership opportunities in our cities and our majority cities like Brockton or Boston or Laurel and Lawrence, because we want to live in the communities where we grew up. And so we need everyone to invest not only in affordable housing, but also in affordable home ownership.
Absolutely. We also want to talk about food access, because we know Dr. King spoke about access to adequate food by being a fundamental human right? Between rising food costs, potential SNAP benefit changes. Right now, it's a difficult time to put food on the table, right? So can you talk about the demand for resources that the state is seeing and how the state is trying to meet that demand?
You know, Dr. King talked a lot about the need to not have to choose for basic dignity and survival. I remember being a young girl fighting to get a Stop and Shop in my neighborhood because we did not have a grocery store within 2 miles of our neighborhood. We had bodegas, we had corner stores, but we did not have access to affordable and healthy food. And we know that's connected to everything in our lives. The 2nd Suffolk District that I represent, which are the neighborhoods of Hyde Park all the way to the South End, is number 3rd in SNAP reliance. So when President Trump and the Republicans really voted against the SNAP benefits, which we already paid for, it really hit my community hard. There are lines every day on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Fridays at food pantries in my community. And so we're fighting this fight around food access is not just about hunger. It's about access to quality food that is culturally competent. We want to eat our different foods that we are familiar with. And funding the food pantries have been very difficult. Many of them have lost cuts in being able to provide this type of food for the thousands of people that need it.
I wish we could talk more, because you've been a big voice when it comes to maternal health as well. We will talk more eventually. We've talked about this. But State Senator Liz Miranda, we appreciate your voice and for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A pen, a page, and a purpose. How the first poet laureate of Massachusetts is using words to empower.